For years, we've spoken about bridging the gender gap. We've debated, we've discussed, but now it's time for action. We take a decisive step forward as we unveil the Future Female Forward, Close the Gender Gap Charter, a blueprint for real measurable change. The Charter sets clear, actionable goals for increasing female representation at all levels of leadership. And to lead this momentous unveiling, it is only fitting that we invite someone who represents a global institution that has actively championed inclusivity and leadership diversity. Please join me in welcoming Hitendra Dave, CEO of HSBC India, to the stage, and let's unveil the Charter. Ladies and gentlemen, keep the applause going as we unveil the Charter.
I am fearless, I'm driven, I'm a change maker. They think they can stop me.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Future Female Forward Close the Gender Gap Charter. And joining them for this landmark moment, we are honored to have some of the most influential voices driving change across industries. Now we turn to the core of our mission, creating equal opportunity workplaces. Research from McKinsey and World Economic Forum proves that diverse leadership teams drive higher profitability and innovation. Yet challenges remain in the form of persistent gender pay gaps and underrepresentation of women in leadership. So what does this mean for India's business landscape? How are top leaders addressing these challenges while unlocking the true potential of diverse workplaces? To lead this important conversation, I request Shireen to kindly join us back on stage and to bring us exclusive insights from the front lines of corporate leadership. It is my absolute privilege to welcome our distinguished speakers, Hitendra Dave, CEO, HSBC India, Rajesh Warrier, EVP Global Head of Operations and Chairman and Managing Director, Cognizant India, Vartika Shukla, Chairman Engineers India. We've also got Prabha Narasimhan, MD and CEO, Colgate-Palmolive India, Rajesh Jejurikar, Executive Director and CEO at Mahindra Group. We've also got Ameera Shah, Promoter and Executive Chairperson, Metropolis Healthcare, and Ashish Dhawan, Founder and CEO, the Convergence Foundation. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause for our panelists. Shireen, with that, it's over to you.
This makes me so happy, ladies and gentlemen. I've been doing this for 25 years now, and invariably, when I'm at one of these events, I'm usually the only woman on stage with a long line of men in suits. And this is what we're hoping to do, achieve gender parity, and we've done that starting here on our panel this evening. So many, many thanks to my panelists for joining us here this evening. Hitendra Dave, this started as a conversation that both of us had on a flight, and today, 3 years on, it has become a movement. As you look at where we are today, and Pooja was just giving us the data, while we have mainstreamed the conversation and progress has been made in some areas, there's a long road to cover. It's a long distance to go, Hitendra. From the experience that you've had so far with the movement as well as with HSBC, what's next?
You can argue with everything except facts. Right? So once the facts start to show that this conversation is beginning to have impact, now, we should be proportional in our expectations. I don't expect 10,000 companies in India to look at this program and say, hey, we need to change our diversity or hiring or inclusion policies. But it is very difficult today to be running a reasonable sized business and not be having this conversation. I think I can't believe any board or executive committee or top management teams don't talk about this, right? I think how to go about it, there is a debate. Should we have hard numbers? Like our board, right? I mean, I don't know if everybody is aware here, but we are a fairly large organization globally, right? I mean, 50% of our board is women. And that wasn't done as a conscious DEI thing. It just so happened that 50% of the directors that the bank was looking for were very, very brilliant women, right? So similarly, at some of our senior most executives, I think you are aware, our CFO is possibly not just a woman, possibly the senior most Indian woman in the banking industry, right? She's from India. It's like she's not grown up abroad. She studied here and
yeah.
went there, etc. So we have many stories to tell. But to answer your question, I think we need, and I know you're going to do this over the course of this session in this year, we need the real leaders, women leaders in particular. I think their insights, their stories, what it took them, was it such a significant sacrifice? How did they manage it? You need young girls and women in schools and colleges to get inspired, right? I mean, political leaders, business leaders, executive leaders. So that would be next, where it's, where it moves from being an agenda number 6 to just being a natural. It's like product innovation, or it's like customer centricity, right? When boards and executive managements get to the point where they talk about diversity and inclusion in the same vein as customer or things like that, I think that would be a good.
Vartika Shukla, let me come to you. We're talking about the private sector's involvement. Let's talk about the public sector's involvement as well. I don't know how many of you know this. Vartika Shukla is a graduate from IIT Kanpur and is today one of the few women leading a public sector organization. She leads Engineers India Limited. So Vartika, I want to understand from you, through your own journey and the arc that you've been able to make, what do you believe has changed, but what do you believe needs to change from here on?
Thank you, Shireen. It's a delight to be part of this very prestigious gathering, wherein we have thoughts from all sectors of the industry and both the genders together, working towards a common goal. One thing that differentiates public sectors, to put in point, is, and we talked about pay parity to begin the conversation about how to bring equality in the workspaces for both men and women. In the public sector space, one thing is very clear. Everybody gets the same pay and gets the same raise. So that settles one part of the issue, which is...
And it's an important issue.
It's a very important issue. Yes. And I have seen that. In fact, I was reading Sheryl Sandberg, and it was... it's a big issue in terms of even negotiations which women have to do in spaces to actually achieve and get what they truly deserve. Going back to the point as to where we are, what needs to be done, I think the one thing is, and if I specifically look at the engineering space, or I look at, there are many disciplines where the parity is already achieved. You look at medical sciences, you look at the legal space, you look at the financial space, IT space. There are good spaces where we have equal representation at all levels, as Mr. Dave also mentioned. But looking at particularly in the engineering space, I think it needs to attract a lot more talent. We need to plug leaky pipelines as we go along the career journey of women. Public sectors are putting in a lot of enablers in terms of policy. We heard the allocation of the percentage of our budget into women development through a lot of programs from various ministries. But to enable that, to put it into force, to actually needs commitment at leadership level, which is there. I'll give you some examples. There are companies in the public sector space who have all manned process plants, who have, like we have now, women in construction, which is not easy as a space to be in. So looking at all these aspects, looking at conscious policy creation, looking at continuous monitoring, making sure that step by step we grow up in the percentage and make sure that we give spaces in leadership position to women. I think that would, in a holistic way, kind of move the needle towards steering their careers to higher decision-making processes.
So this is the good news, that at least as far as pay parity is concerned, the public sector has been able to achieve that. So we're hoping that the private sector takes notes from that. But Ashish, to the point that was being made both by Pooja as well as Vartika, India perhaps has some of the most progressive policies when we talk about women in the workforce, whether it's maternity leave, maternity benefits, or it is gender budgeting, as was just discussed. So capital is relatively less of a constraint today. Why do you believe then that we're still at that 18% number as opposed to the aspirational 30% number that we're hoping to get to by 2030?
No, thanks, Shireen. I think a lot of it has to do with the mindset of our leadership. I mean, the data is very clear that 18% of the 12 million employees in the top 2,000 companies are women. So it's only 2 million women. I think we have to make a pledge that I think the top 2,000 will probably have 18 million employees by 2030. And if we can get to 30%, that's 5.5 million women. That'll be a dramatic change. It's almost 3x in terms of number of women. And these are some of the best jobs. These are the largest companies in India. I think that even though companies pay lip service to this, I don't think they work hard enough on this issue. Because in every sector, we see outliers, and we don't see companies making the effort to achieve what's already been achieved by outliers in India. So if you take, say, the banking sector, 26% of the banking sector, the workforce are women. But there are 2 banks in India already that have crossed 40%. And there are others that are stuck at 10%. Our neighboring Sri Lanka is at 45%. Vietnam's at 68%. I think we can easily get to 40%. As a sector, if the leadership is committed to it and really wants to make it happen. You know, there are often excuses about women working in branches or feet on street. Yeah. That's the challenge. But there are banks that have actually shown that it's possible to make it happen. Similarly, if you look at the pharmaceutical sector, it's only 11% women. But there are pharma companies at 25% and there are others at 2%. So I think what Pooja and team have done is really looked at those outliers to dissect what they've been doing to make those role models, and companies can actually speak to their peers. You know, these champions, in a sense, are more than happy to share what they've done. And I think what we need is leadership to sign on for concrete targets in 2030. So I, company X, am at 25%, I commit to get to 35 or 40%, share it with the board, and have an action plan you disclose publicly. I think that's what will get us there eventually. And you, Shireen, have to help us to get those CEOs to sign on the dotted line.
So here's the backstory. This is something that we discussed and debated. Should we, as part of the charter, put down a number where we get people to commit to that particular number? And finally, we pulled back because we said that, look, these are things that will perhaps require board approval. These are things that people will have to take to different stakeholders within the organization. So we didn't want a situation where we ambush people, because this is really not about that. This is about getting people to voluntarily sign up and come on board. But this was a discussion that we had between the CNBC and the Udayati team on whether we should put a number down as part of the charter. And we're hoping to get there. We're hoping that this conversation will lead us there. But Prabha Narasimhan, let me come to you now. And you know, my fear today, what we're seeing happen globally, and I did address that in the remarks that I made early on, there's this talk about the tyranny of diversity and inclusion. Do you worry that we're likely to see a pullback, a retreat from some of these issues that require urgent intervention and action?
So thanks, Shireen. I think firstly, Shireen, the minute you combine diversity and inclusion together, I think the likelihood of pullback is very, very low. Because what that says is that we're going to get in people who are different, gender being one of the ways you can get in people who are different, and make sure that they feel included in an organization enough to be able to stay and progress. So I'm really glad that you combined the two words together, because the concern really is, and if I may, to your point, the concern on putting targets is that it signals, whether you mean it to signal or not, that you are willing to compromise on meritocracy. And I don't think there is any woman in this room or anywhere else who wants a suggestion that there is a willingness to compromise on meritocracy. I think the answer may be a little bit to the question is, as you get them in for interviews, for discussions, that the slate is balanced, and then let the best person win to get the job. And if I may, sorry, to Mr. Dave's point on, if I may say to the women in this room and beyond, there are many jobs that we've traditionally thought are not a great idea for women. And coming from an FMCG background, sales is one of them. Attracting women into sales actually is very, very difficult, because all said and done, it is a difficult job. But honestly, it is fantastic learning. And if you put yourself out there, the rewards that it gives you are tremendous. So if I could just urge the women in this room to take these challenges and take some of these leaps, it would really help as well.
No, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think that does deserve a big round of applause because, you know, very, very often, because of the biases and because of the societal construct and patriarchy, let's call it what it is, women often abdicate spaces for fear or because it's not in their comfort zone. And I think it is time that we challenge some of those norms. It's time that we challenge some of those roles. Rajesh Jujurikar, you know, this is something that Mahindra & Mahindra has decided to prioritize. I know this right at the leadership level, from Anish to you, you are championing the idea of making the workforce much more diverse and inclusive. Explain to me what you've done that's working, and what are you setting targets for yourself, for instance? What are you going about addressing by way of culture to ensure that this changes?
Yeah. Thanks, Shireen, and great to be on this panel. And let me just build from where Prabha left off, and which was the last part of your question. And that's around targets. And, you know, that's something we've debated at every level, including at our board, and taken a very conscious call that we will not have targets. And we actually consulted with many women leaders in the organization, and every one of them felt that that's the worst thing we can do. Because no woman, like you said, wants to feel that they made it because there was a target or a quota. So, you know, every woman wants to get there on merit. It's the role of the organization to create enablers and facilitate the process. And that's, I think, is the key leadership role. So, you know, while we have targets on so many other parameters, I think this is one area we've got to realize that there is a sensitivity and a softness and an emotion which needs to be addressed, and a commitment which has to come truly from within. And also a mindset, especially in the industry some of us operate in, that it's not something that can happen instantly and overnight. And so I'll just take a couple of minutes talking about things which are important, things which need focus. So, and I'm going to talk starting from the workforce, because, you know, when we talk about overall numbers as a nation by way of contribution of women to the workforce, getting women in manufacturing, which is really the core of our business, really is a very high priority, and that's where we are putting most of our focus on. So firstly, you know, manufacturing lines which we are creating, concepts like paint shop will have only women. You know, some of the assembly lines, we've identified some cells which will have 40–50% women. The critical thing here, firstly, is reaching out to villages around the plant and creating a perception of it being a safe workplace, because that is very important in the society in which they live. So the ability to transport them in and back. When women go back late at night, we have a system by which you know, the HR gets message that they've got dropped home safely. So, you know, there are multiple things, cameras around the plant. So really, you know, creating a very positive word of mouth that it's safe for women to be here. So that we think is a key enabler. The other one is working closely with the training institutes like ITI and many others to create, we have a program called Kabil, and we were associated with 2,000 institutions, which is skill building. So firstly, how do you create the desire, then the education, and then, of course, the retention. So that's at the entry level. As we go up the rest of the leadership hierarchy, and, you know, I think the key challenge has been women dropping out of workplace. Yeah. And which is where you spoke about the maternity policy. So we've introduced a maternity policy a year back, which gives a lot of flexibility to women. Supports them with allowances during that period of time. But really what they need is the time flexibility. And we give almost a window of 3 years with complete flexibility on timing. And the other program we've launched is something we call SOAR, which is, we just started, and that's not S-O-R-E, it's S-O-A-R, which is to attract women back who've taken a gap in their work careers, and then run a mentorship and training program to help them get back. So we're starting with 25 women we've just started who have had 5 years experience and taken a break of 18 months to 3 years and then want to come back. So I think we've got to address this at multiple levels, starting from the entry level. We often try to solve for this in industries at the leadership level, and I think that's not the right place to start. The leadership is to focus on how to make it happen.
Absolutely, and we do need to have a bottoms-up approach. I completely agree with you there, and then work your way to the top. But, you know, you're talking about safety, and I remember one of our panelists here on Future Female Forward had spoken about when they were setting up their manufacturing facility, and it was in the hinterlands in I think, Rajasthan somewhere, and they decided to do something which was innovative. They decided to call the mothers-in-law into the workspace to come and have a look at where their daughters-in-law were going to go to work. And once you got the buy-in from mothers-in-law, you actually saw the rate of women joining the workforce go up significantly. So, you know, you've really got to customize solutions. You've got to think out of the box, and you've got to think on your feet. Speaking about maternity and return to work, Amira Shah, let me come to you, because Amira has got 3 children, twins, and her 5-year-old just celebrated a birthday yesterday. So I want to understand from you, Amira, because this is a big challenge, especially when we talk about women opting out of the workforce. As someone who's gone through this yourself, as a leader, how do you shape policy? How do you shape decisions that will provide a facilitating, enabling environment to ensure that women don't find it easier to opt out?
You know, frankly, Shireen, it's very easy to opt out, because I think once you have children, there's a nice cocoon at home in which you feel very comfortable and happy and safe, and you don't feel the need to go out at all. And honestly, salute to the women who actually choose to say, you know what, I'm going to give it my all at work, I'm going to give it all my home, and I can actually do it all. And it's amazing, because it's such a hard thing to do and to balance. It's really incredible. But I think if we truly want to see transformational change in India, I think we don't need to look that far. We need to also borrow from other countries. And just to bring up the elephant in the room, right? First, the question is, why should we close the gap? That's the first question. Honestly, when I've been on the board of so many companies, when I bring this point up, sometimes people just say, but why? It's neither helping my business, there's no business case, it's not helping my P&L, it's not doing this, so why should I do it? And in the US, you talked about the tyranny of diversity. I mean, in the US, you see with the new president coming in, a lot of that is going backwards, right? So it just tells you that corporates react to either carrot or stick. The idea of doing the right thing is not necessarily so common and so prevalent. So there was a sort of a stick at that point in the US. People were pushing for D&I. Now it's not there, so everyone's sort of going backwards. So in India, we got to decide, hey, are we going to use carrot or stick? Because something is needed. Because people alone just to do the right thing, here we may be preaching to the choir of the converted, but that may not be true for the rest of the country, even the top 2,000 businesses in the country. So in my mind, we really need to talk about transformational policy. If you look at Vietnam, for example, they've created some amazing incentive programs for corporates who are hiring more women. Right? They've created different tax structures. Besides creating, like you talked about, workplace safety, they've created, manufacturing companies have created all-night work women shifts. So only women work at night in that shift. So whether the mother-in-law is comfortable or not, she knows that, hey, there's no other man there, my daughter or my daughter-in-law is safe. So I think there are some very fundamental things other countries have done. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can borrow those ideas and make it true for India. But I think the most important thing is you have men in power today. Getting those men in power to identify with a problem which they don't feel today because they have not gone through it is difficult. It's difficult for them, it's difficult for the women. I think we need a carrot or stick. We need a push from government, or we need a pull, an incentive scheme to drive it till it becomes a habit. Nobody questions, that's at some point, men's arms used to be cut off when they made a mistake. Taj Mahal and guillotine and all of that. And in today's corporate world, that would be just ridiculous. But that was normal at the time. I mean, today, the fact that we're talking about women getting paid differently just seems like a ridiculous idea. Yeah. I mean, 20 years later, I'm assuming this is not going to be common practice.
Well, we certainly hope it won't be common practice. That's really the idea. But you're right in pointing out that there needs to perhaps be a carrot and a stick approach. And look, the stick has worked to some degree when we decided to mandate company boards to actually bring women independent directors on board. You actually saw the data tell you that there was a change. So sometimes, as Amira was pointing out, you do need the stick to be wielded to make change happen. Rajesh Warrior, I want to understand from you, we're also talking about living in an age of AI and hyper-technology. And is that, to your mind, going to leave the women more behind? Or is that, in fact, going to provide a way out and a way forward?
Shireen, first of all, congratulations on your season 3. We in Cognizant are proud sponsors of what you're doing here. I think being a flag bearer on Future Female Forward is just fantastic. Thank you for having me on the show. Your question about AI, let's take it in 2 buckets, right? AI is definitely going to disrupt every industry that we know in different degrees. We have done a study along with Oxford Economics a while back, which looked at about 1,000 jobs comprising of 18,000 tasks, and it tells us that 90% of the jobs will get disrupted, of course, in varying degrees. Now, you look at that lens and you look at the problem statement that you're talking about. There are 2 buckets I would like to put this problem into. One is existing workforce. For the existing workforce, there's a great opportunity for every organization to make sure that the existing workforce is completely trained on AI, irrespective of gender. I have very little worries there because everybody in the workforce will get trained based on the job that they're doing. You have upcoming workforce, which is coming in from universities and colleges, which is the other bucket which I have. And I think it's imperative that industry actually does a partnership with academia to make sure that the colleges and universities have the access to the latest and the greatest in terms of curriculum, in terms of ability to impart education, so that all the men and women coming out of colleges have an equal opportunity to learn the latest and the greatest technologies. Today it is AI. 6 years back, if we were having this conversation, Shireen, we would have been talking about digital technologies. Tomorrow it'll be something else. But I think there is an opportunity for us to bridge any divide that exists with the current way of technologies. But there is a lot of onus on the industry to make sure that we turn around and partner with universities. And Cognizant is, as an example, we are doing that. We are partnering with some 19 different colleges to be able to achieve that. So there's a great opportunity for us to bring parity.
There is an opportunity there, and we need those linkages and those partnerships to work. But Ashish, I want to come back to Amira's point about the why. And I think we still continue to deal with the why in many, many ways across different sectors. And it doesn't matter what the World Bank says, it doesn't matter what the IMF says in terms of the benefits that the economy will accrue on account of unlocking women as consumers, women as workers. As you speak with CEOs today, as you talk to people in the boardroom today, is the why still an issue that is that's begging an answer?
I think it is, Shireen, and that's why just a mandate may not be sufficient. I think we do need to, there is plenty of research out there that clearly shows that having a higher percentage of women in the workforce, in leadership positions, lead to better outcomes. But I think companies have to experience it themselves. And in India's case, they have to break a lot of barriers. I'll tell you, if you look at the factory, and out in the field, those are the 2 areas where across industries, why is FMCG stuck at 11%? Why is pharma at 11%? Why is banking at 26%? It's because we have in India this myth that it's not safe for women to be out there. We've decided, in a paternalistic manner, that's the case. There are companies that have broken the barriers, where in a logistics warehouse, you'll see women doing jobs that you could never imagine earlier that they would do on the shop floor. But that story is not told enough. And I think that's what's holding us back, is the fact that it's going to lead to a better, more productive work environment. And it's definitely possible. You know,
And it's
our labor laws, by the way, are still archaic. There are, if you
But
look at
that's
the
for
list
men as
of...
well. But that's for men as well. You know, overall.
No. If you look, there are in most states, that women are prevented from working in
Working at
quote-unquote hazardous industries. And if I showed you that list, you'd be appalled.
Yes.
And in some states, they're prevented from working at night.
Yeah.
Now, that's changing, but changing too slowly.
Changing too slowly. You're absolutely right. Vartika Shukla, let me ask you, you know, we're talking about next steps. In your experience leading engineers India today, how do you draw more women into manufacturing, into engineering, into construction? How do you retain them? How do you ensure that there is, in fact, a pipeline of leaders who also happen to be women?
So before I get on to that, I'll just add to what Ashish mentioned. I think we need to believe as leaders, we need to believe as boards that we have the power and ability to change things, change laws if we are convinced. And I'll supplement this by an example. One of our sister PSUs who runs a refinery in Panipat actually went out there and changed the law for night shift working in the state. And today, one of their plants is completely manned by women. And they could do that because they were convinced that we need to show that as an example of not just breaking the barrier, but also having other women believe that it is possible for them to work in a safe environment, to actually be as competent, as able as men. And that's important. I believe that this reinforces the fact that women in general are, see that as an example to aspire, to have ambition, to have examples which are right in front of them, which actually provides them that work environment. So it's very important for us who sit in positions to make that change, to actually use these opportunities to create platform. And I'm telling you, with my experience, it is very much possible. Let me now come to the construction sites. We are a project management company. We run about 55 sites all over the world where we implement projects in the oil and gas sector, in infrastructure sector, and NFM. There are several sectors that we work in. In our technical domain, we have 15% women, which is not easy for any organization, any engineering company to actually nurture and have. We have leadership positions which are actually steered by women. And they look at projects not only in India, but also overseas. Now, that comes from a fact that the environment is an enabler. Culturally, we've been having equal opportunities for everybody, equal space. Of course, there are struggles. Nothing comes without struggles. To say that everything is hunky-dory is not true. But where there's a will, there is a way. That is also true. So we run programs wherein we inspire women to go to construction site. We call it Tejaswini, where we nurture talent who actually want to come out and take up these steps. So we put them together. We put them separately also. And a lot of our technical staff, the 15% that I mentioned, actually go to sites, difficult conditions, harsh conditions. So I have been through that crucible as well. And I tell you, it's a joy for us to see them shine. And it also brings value to our organization as well.
Absolutely, and I think that is important to highlight. We've talked about SOAR, and we're now talking about Tejaswini, and we need many, many more examples, ladies and gentlemen. So a round of applause for the work that's being done to encourage women to make their way into spaces that previously didn't exist. But Prabha, I want to understand from you your own journey of having worked across different organizations to now leading an organization in the FMCG sector. You talked about the challenges of drawing women into sales, but not just drawing women into the workforce in different functions, but keeping them there. Give me the 2 or 3 practical things that have worked and the things that you believe we need to focus on.
So I think the couple of things that I worked hard, really the obvious things. One, which is to guarantee that you will have a job and a job of equal stature or better than the one that you left when you go on maternity leave or you go on break to have a child. The second is to aid with childcare. whether it's a creche or it's a support for a creche. Those are the really obvious ones. But I think the one thing that perhaps we need to think about as we do this is to make parenting an equal opportunity thing. Whenever we talk about parenting, we tend to talk about what the woman will do and how much leave she can take and what she can do. And I know there are many men out there who would really dearly love an opportunity as much to be fathers to their children, and yet maybe either the sanction is not there or the policies are not there. And so we've tried to make a move. We've started 3 months of paternity leave up from the 2 weeks, encouraging men actually to take time off when they have children, because after a while you can certainly do pretty much everything that the mom could do, and maybe that will help as well. But I do think that's an area where we could make even more progress than we've made so far.
Oh, absolutely. I think sharing the load is crucial. It's critical, and we do need to take that message forward. Rajesh, you know, the 2 or 3 things that have worked with what you've been able to do on the ground level, especially to draw women into manufacturing on the assembly line and keep them there.
Yeah, I spoke about some of these, Shireen. I think one is getting the union leaders to believe that it's important. Because then they take ownership, and we've seen that in in all our manufacturing facilities where we're building that. Having that as a leadership conversation is a huge facilitator, because then they believe that is an important priority. The second, and the challenge I think we still have to grapple with, is keeping women in workplace. Especially in manufacturing, because the typical tendency is, they would feel they are, let's say, societally permitted to work till they get married, but that paradigm could change once they're married, especially in the blue collar. So I think that needs work on attitude training. And we've actually, in our Nagpur plant where we make tractors, the women, the girls who work there actually, do skits and share stories, because that's a great way to build confidence. So, going back, and I spoke to my parents who spoke to someone else's father to say, this is a place you can work in. We find that really working. The storytelling around this and using skits on shop floors to tell stories of how they went back and created word of mouth. So that's, I think, something that's really working. Just on what's not working, I think making this happen in sales is something we've struggled a lot with. We have to keep in mind it's not just the feeling of security, there's just complete lack of infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that is a challenge today. I see that changing a lot with highways and roadways coming up, where you have restrooms coming up along the way. So there's a very, very rapid change that's happening. But there is a real issue of infrastructure. There is a real issue of quality of hotels in many towns, the safety that those places offer. So I think there are real issues around deep field work. Organizations like Ashish said have found ways around it. And one of the solutions we have found wherever we're doing this is to hire locally. And not transfer across states, because then there is a comfort of having grown up in that area, and they know how to navigate their way around that geography.
Amira, I want to ask you, next steps, the things that you believe we need to focus on, and really from your own experience, share with us what you would like to tell women here in this room, women who are watching, especially young girls who are looking at starting their careers, building their careers. From your own experience, what is it that you would share with them?
So I think, look, at Metropolis, being in healthcare, we're quite lucky because we already have a pretty good gender balance, right? Like we said, healthcare is pretty high up there. But at Metropolis, we are at about almost 48% women, which is amazing, right? So you literally, and we've managed to create an organization where women across don't feel a gender bias at all. And the way we've done that is not only obviously by having leaders who are representing that, but by making equal opportunity a value system. Often I find in organizations, if there's a guy who's a great performer on financials, all his other behaviors will get ignored, right? Whether it's sexual harassment or whether it's not equal opportunity, he's biased, gender bias, or anything else. We've been very clear, your performance is great, but your value system is equally important in the organization, and your value system includes the fact that you will deal with people equally, whether it's of gender, religion, caste, creed, whatever it is, right? And I think that's been a fundamental way to be able to create that no bias in the organization. So, but we still do struggle with enough women at the senior leadership level. So if I look at just the CXO group, unfortunately, out of 12, I have only 2 women along with me, which is one of the agenda points, which I'm going to give my own organization going forward to say, this needs to move closer to a 40 to 50% ratio in the years to come. Just out there for all the women, the only point I want to make is, we've all been so conditioned by society to stay away from risk. Whether it's our fathers, whether it's our brothers, whether it's our husbands, constantly telling us, be safe, come home at this time, don't do this, don't do that. Our whole lives we've heard, avoid this risk. And then suddenly when the woman becomes older, we say, oh, now go out of the house and do field work and, become an entrepreneur and do this. And I mean, you're asking a person who you've conditioned to, have no risk to now suddenly become risk prone. And if you look at women entrepreneurship, it's all about living with uncertainty, or any entrepreneurship. So I think a lot of it has to go back to how we bring up our daughters and stop protecting them in these golden cages and keeping them away from every iota of risk, because that is not life. We have to teach them how to navigate it versus teaching them a way to stay away from it. And to me, I think once we can all learn to embrace risk, we can do anything.
Most certainly can do anything. Rajesh, talk to me about Project Shakti. That is something that you're taking forward also to ensure that you create that pipeline of leaders as well as get women to take the risks that Amira was talking about.
Yeah, Shireen. I've worked in the industry for 30 years now. Every organization has well-intentioned DEI programs. In Cognizant, Shakti program has actually blown me away. It is such a well thought through program. What we are doing with Shakti is we are looking at the entire career path of a woman, even before they start a job, all the way through to leadership. What are the support structures that we need to provide her for her success? At the lowest level, when you're looking at the workforce coming out of colleges, so we have a program called Nurture Her. It is about focusing on women who are in colleges, looking to having aspirations to build a career. What is the guidance you can provide them in various ways? It's about how to deal with objections in the family when you get a job and you have to move away from your home, and everybody says, "So, are you sure you want to move?" What do you do in that situation? To actually helping them understand how to manage personal finance, to a bunch of other things. So Nurture Her is a very important program. Then when they step into the workforce, the first thing that happens is anybody who steps into a workforce for the first time really don't know how to navigate the organization. So we have a bunch of programs which actually focus on that. Then when they move to the managerial cadre, in the beginning levels, how to manage a team, how to negotiate, how to make presentation skills, how to build your own brand. So we have a very good construct around Shakti, and it's a program that we started a year back. We had, of course, a lot of D&I programs, but we have curated this into a group called Shakti, and we have a D&I team which does a phenomenal job of making sure that we're working through it and ensuring that it's actually being effective. So,
well, more Shakti to you and to the team. Hitendra Dave, next steps. We've done a lot of work here at Future Female Forward. What do you see as the ambition from here?
No, I think just I wanted to comment on one or two of the things that was spoken about. One is on pay, right? For example, we do disclose by gender. Okay, and India is one of the few countries that has been chosen for that project. So it is possible to, now obviously you have to decide how much to disclose, because you can't disclose individual names, but yeah. And there is a checking done when we are deciding our compensation. Is there a trend somewhere? Is there a bias somewhere on this? Either side, by the way. Right. Either side, okay, yeah. Right? So I think that's one. But I think to answer your question, I think, see, this is a multi-decadal journey, right? Yeah. I mean, let's be proportional in our, if 3 sessions could do it, then we would all be happily going home. So this is a multi-decadal journey. But I think at least for financial services, which I'm the only representative of here, I really like to think that at most banks, whoever gets selected because he or she is highly talented.
Yeah.
And if they get promoted because they are highly talented. And if they don't, then it's also, I think that phase, at least in financial services, I think of having serious unconscious biases, I think is increasingly more the rear view than the front view mirror or so. But I think, as more and more people like us take the conversations back, as this becomes, why gets addressed through, you take a list of companies headed by women or where there's a lot of women directors or there's a senior amount of, and you see their stock price performance, and that data is out there, right?
Yes, it is.
Right. So that's why the why should be there, I'm sure. But I would like to say that I think, given what's happening in US and things like that, I think this is a subject which will require much more nuanced conversations going forward. You just can't be as black or white as we were, say, 2 years back or so.
Yeah, a nuanced conversation, but also a conversation that cannot retreat into the back rooms, a conversation that must continue to be mainstreamed. Vartika and Prabha, I'm going to give you the closing comments here. Vartika, from your own experience, what's been the biggest learning, and what is it that you would like to share with us and with women and with men who are watching, with fathers, husbands, brothers who are watching?
This is quite complicated. You made it, Shireen. But the one thing that I would say is to women at all times, stay focused. Put your targets in, keep the targets in sight always. Believe in yourself. The sky is the limit. There's no, there's nothing second to hard work, discipline, all that. But to continue on that journey in a focused manner, and also looking ahead is very important. 5 years down the line, where you want to be, how you want to shape yourself, what kind of enablers, what kind of cross-functional talents you need to accrue to yourself, what kind of networking you need to do. There are so many lists of items, but you have to stay focused. And let me tell you, no one can do it alone. No gender can do it alone. And everybody wants talent on the table. Today, every corporate, private, public, anywhere, all over the world is in transition. Everybody wants to stay relevant all the time, to be up ahead on the curve. So every talent is required on the table, and in that, none of us have done it alone. The men have been part of the growth. I have had mentors who have been men. Without batting an eyelid, they would send me away single to remote locations all over the world, and never even look and ask whether you'll be able to make it or not. So I've had that opportunity, and I give that opportunity to others. So it's a journey which is together. We can reach it together, and with the focus of managements all over to put this agenda as an important one. I think we are there, but we need to continue on this path of discussion, debate, getting little things in place as we go along to have that 50% women on boards of all companies.
Well, 50% women on boards of all companies, that is an ambition. That is certainly an aspiration that we hope to take forward. Prabha, I'll give you the closing comment here on the biggest lessons from your own journey that you'd like to leave us with.
So I think, no pressure at all, but I think the two things I'd like to leave with is one, for women in this room and outside to have self-belief, because when you have self-belief, there really isn't a lot that can stop you. And the second would be to ask for help from the men in your life. I wouldn't be sitting here. My daughter is writing ICSE. My husband is at home, and that's why I'm here. So definitely ask for help from the men in your life.
Ask for help, keep the conversation going, lots of confidence, lots of self-belief. Prabha, Rajesh, Hitendra Dave, Vartika Shukla, Rajesh Jujurikar, Amira Shah, and Ashish Dhawan, thank you so much for being here with us today to take this conversation forward. We look forward to hearing more from you with each of your experiences. And ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for all of them.